Hello, Rich Caputo back here again to talk to you about Caedmon's hymn and Dream of the Rood. Like I said, the important thing here is these two are pieces or poems of conversion. And the challenge facing the Christian missionaries was, how do you make Christianity, a religion that believes in one God and is more or less predicated on peace, appealing to a pagan culture that believed in multiple gods and was very, very warlike? Well, Caedmon's hymn and Dream of the Rood do it in two different ways. So we'll talk about Caedmon's hymn first because that technically comes first. And long story short, well, not a long story. It's not that long. Basically, Caedmon was basically like a shepherd. He worked in the stables. He wasn't anybody spectacular. He wasn't anybody special. Um, he worked in a monastery. And when all the monks started gathering together and singing and having dinner, he went outside because he didn't sing. He didn't have a voice. He didn't feel like he should be there. So one night, Caedmon falls asleep and is visited by an angel of the Lord, and is given the ability to sing, with an amazing, amazing, beautiful voice. And Caedmon's hymn's not that long. It's basically, I'm trying to count it right now, 2, 4, 8, 16 lines. And that's the beginning of English literature right there. If you listen to the recording I put up there of Caedmon's hymn being read out loud, it doesn't sound like English at all. Like, it sounds like you can make out a couple words here and there, but that's the beginning of English literature right there, those 16 lines. And for our purpose, for our point of view, how does those 16 lines, or the story of Caedmon, make Christianity appealing to a pagan religion? And here's how it does that. This is the important part. He was nobody. He was nothing. And an angel of the Lord, Christianity, God was available to him when God went out of his way to reach out to Caedmon, who was a nobody. And here's the logic, here's the appeal. Remember, in a pagan religion, your value to society and your value in the afterlife was predicated or based on how good you were in battle, how many people you killed, how awesome you were on the battlefield. That's what got you into the good part of the afterlife. That's also what got you power in this world, because presumably if you were the best warrior, you would be the king. That doesn't matter in Christianity. Christianity, God, heaven is available to anybody, at all. If someone as, hate to use the word, like insignificant or low on the totem pole as Caedmon could be given a gift by an angel, be given a gift by God, then that could happen to anybody. Even if you weren't a warrior, even if you weren't a king, even if you were low on social status, Christianity was available to you. And that's the appeal. That is the way the Christian missionaries were trying to appeal to the pagans. Make Christianity seem like it can be available to anybody. Make God's grace, God's gift, heaven, the afterlife, whatever you want to call it, available to even the lowest of the low. Doesn't matter if you're a great warrior. Doesn't matter if you're awesome on the battlefield. Doesn't matter if you're a king. Christianity was available to everybody. Are there other elements that are important to about Caedmon's hymn? Maybe two more. One, and this isn't a huge deal, the style of the poem, and we're not going to get really into this because we're not spending a ton of time on it. The style of the poem was this type of style that was used to praise kings. So what the Christian missionaries kind of slyly did was use a form that the pagan people were familiar with, that was used to praise their kings, and use that style to praise God. Is it a huge point? No, but it's worth mentioning. The other thing is this idea of the angel coming down to Caedmon. It's kind of couched in the terms of a dream, and dream poems or poems about dreams are fairly popular. in pagan culture. Which brings me to Dream of the Rood, which is a little bit more complex, and it takes a little bit of a different angle of making Christianity appealing to a pagan warrior culture. And it's all predicated on this. This poem, it's another dream poem. It's about someone talking to the cross, so that's obviously a dream. And basically, the cross is telling the story of the crucifixion of Jesus. And the way it appeals to a warrior pagan culture is like this. Well, Jesus is going off to meet his death. How would a pagan warrior go off to meet his death? Scared and timid? No. Bravely, proudly, nobly, strongly. And that's how Jesus comes across in the Dream of the Rood. He comes across as a brave, not a warrior, but brave, going off proudly to meet his death. He knows his death is coming, but he is going to embrace it. He is going to go out with honor, with dignity, with strength, just like a pagan warrior would go out to meet his death. So Jesus is kind of not depicted as a warrior, but connected or related to a warrior, going off bravely and proudly and strongly to meet his death. That's one way. Rood means cross, and in a lot of ways, the cross is an important character in this poem. The tree that is going to become the cross that Jesus is crucified on, if you go back and read the poem, the cross doesn't want to do it. The cross doesn't want to become the instrument of Jesus' death. But it's the cross's duty, it's the tree's duty to do so. So it does it. It doesn't want to, but it does become the cross. It does its duty because it has to, and that's its responsibility. And I think maybe you can see how that would appeal to a pagan culture where duty and responsibility is very important. The tree does not want to do this. It wants no part of this, but it has to. So it does. It fulfills its duty, and at the end of the poem, the tree eventually becomes the cross, and then it comes back all like draped in gold and decorated and looking really like ritzy and fancy. So it gets rewarded for doing its duty. So both Jesus, a warrior going off to bravely encounter his death, and the tree that becomes the cross doesn't want to do it, but it's the duty of the tree to become the cross. It does it, and it gets rewarded. Those are the two main ways the Dream of the Rood makes Christianity appealing to a pagan culture. Are there other ways? Yeah, absolutely. This is like a low-key way, but we're not going to see it as that big a deal, but the pagans would. If you think back to the brief history of early Britain video I did for you guys, remember the Celtics and the Druids were all about nature worship, and the oak tree was important. And there was this pagan idea that spirits lived in trees. The Greeks called them dryads, the Celtics called them something else. But there was this idea that there were spirits in trees. The idea, the idea that this poem has a talking tree is kind of a low-key throwback or a low-key shout-out to those early pagan ideas of spirits inhabiting trees. So it's something that would have been familiar to a pagan audience. The idea of a tree talking wouldn't seem like crazy to them. They would be like, well, that's in our pagan religion, so that could kind of make sense. And one other kind of low-key way this would appeal to a pagan culture. Remember, a lot of different people invaded Britain and sort of mixed together. And the last one we talked about were the Vikings. And the Vikings brought over their Norse mythology with them. Obviously, Norse mythology. Thor from the Marvel movies is kind of having a resurgence, and Odin was the main god of the Norse religion. And there's a pretty famous story about Odin hanging from the tree of wisdom or the tree of knowledge. And this idea of Jesus hanging from the cross, it's important that the cross starts out as a tree for two reasons. One, like I said, the idea of a tree talking was sort of familiar to the pagans, and the story of Odin hanging from the tree of wisdom was familiar, so it sort of connects back to that. And like I said, I don't have a ton for you guys with these two poems because they are short and they are early, like the earliest pieces written in English, even though it's Old English. But just to recap for you guys, the big ideas, the big takeaways. Caedmon's hymn makes Christianity, heaven, God, whatever you want to call it, available to everybody. If someone as low on the social strata as Caedmon, a poor shepherd who works in a monastery, if Christianity and God is available to him, it's available to everybody, not just great warriors and kings like paganism. Dream of the Rood, it's all about Jesus being depicted as kind of not as a warrior, but like a warrior, bravely and proudly going off to meet his death. And the tree doesn't want to become the cross, doesn't want to do it, but it's its duty. So it does it, and it gets rewarded for it. And that's what I think you guys need to know about Caedmon's hymn and Dream of the Rood. So any questions or anything, obviously email me. And thanks for listening.